Hello everyone and welcome to the edTPA workshop number 2. Again, we had our first workshop about a month ago, so that you can find online, as well as obviously if you're at home now, you're finding this or you found this. So in this workshop, the primary focus will be on task 1. And even more specifically, creating your lesson and your target objectives. Now let's touch on a few things. If you recall, workshop number 1, it was an overview of this whole assessment known as the edTPA. But just moving along, there are some things, just to remember, some basics to remember, if you will. First of all, the edTPA is a reflection of your thinking, and it's based on pedagogy and your students' needs. So again, this is your presentation of your ability to teach, your presentation of your ability to address your students where they are and help to build them up to where you want them to be. This edTPA is writing intensive. Your writing reflects your thinking. So with your writing, obviously be clear and coherent so that the reader or the grader understands what it is you are talking about. Do not leave anything to question and think that just because you get it, that the grader will get it. Make no assumptions. Explicitly write what you mean. And although you aren't being graded in terms of editings in terms of errors made, in terms of, maybe grammatical errors, still don't have them because that affects clarity. So with that said, make sure you proofread. Again, make sure you proofread. And again, make sure you proofread. It would probably even be wise to have a second reader just to go over things, because as writers, we often miss things because we're biased toward our own writing. The assessment handbook, it is there to help you all. So with that said, use it. And use it prior to actually working on the edTPA. It should not be something that you do simultaneously. So that is, you should not be working on this edTPA for the first time and have your edTPA handbook there and just go through step by step, because that would just lead to confusion. So just thoroughly read the entire handbook first, and then it helps to clear things up. It also will help you generate some questions that you might want to ask or think about before beginning. Time management is key. There is a timeline for this. There is a deadline for this. When you are in your student teaching, if you're not in there right now, Professor Rader, who's currently doing it, I know she set up a timeline so that you all are able to upload your items and get them sent to Pearson to grade those in an adequate amount of time, so that you'll receive the feedback from them. If, forbid, there are some sections that you need to rework, you will have time to do that and resubmit. That's particularly important if there are projected dates that you all have in terms of your certification and receiving that. As you know, this is one of the assessments that you will need to complete for certification. In total, just to kind of recap what all those assessments are, a couple you've already done. There is the for those who are able to complete, actually this wouldn't categorize for those who already hold a transitional B. So I'll skip those folks because they're in a different category. Those who do not hold the transitional B, in total, the assessments that you need are the ALST, the CST multi-subject, CST students with disabilities, the EAS, educating all students, and this right here, the edTPA. The only assessments that will be grandfathered in are the CSTs. So if you have previously taken those will be grandfathered in. If you have not taken those, then obviously you will be subjected to the new CSTs that are out there. Each phase, plan out each phase before you actually begin it. So, just like when you engage in a writing project and you have your scratch pad there and you do your brainstorming, treat this in the same manner. Have your scratch pad, make your notes, plan out what it is you want to do so that you can demonstrate your effective teaching. Create decision rules regarding your target students. Extremely important. Again, for this project, you need to choose 2 students. So you need to make sure those students, first of all, are there, most importantly. If little Johnny only comes to school twice a week on a regular, obviously little Johnny's not the good person to use or the good student to use. All right, so again, choose your students carefully. We'll talk about the students a little more as we advance too. Your learning segment. Make sure you plan out your learning segment. What is it going to consist of? Does it make sense? Does it align so that you can present these lesson plans? Because your lesson plans must be consecutive. So that is, you are to have 3 to 5 lesson plans with this assessment. My urging is, keep it easy on yourself. Simpler is better. So I would shoot for the 3 lesson plans. You could have 2 on reserve, again, as I had said before, in case there were, when you receive feedback and there's some things you need to do over, maybe you want to incorporate information from those additional lesson plans. So you can have those on reserve, but in terms of what it is you submit, I would strongly recommend you just stick with the 3 lesson plans, consecutive lesson plans. The edTPA consists of 3 tasks. And again, this is a little review from the first workshop, but our tasks are task 1, which is the planning for instruction and assessment. With each task, there are 5 rubrics. Task 1, 5 rubrics: planning for alignment and development of knowledge and skills, planning, challenge, and support for focused learners, justification of instruction and support, supporting language communication development for access and performance, planning assessments to monitor and support learning. So these 5 rubrics will are what entails the assessing of your task 1. These rubrics are actually they're pretty straightforward, and they are, shall I say, not as complex, maybe even convoluted as the ones that you're used to in terms of the key assessments for our city college classes and courses. So, there's 1 line that they're looking at for the most part for each. 1, maybe even 2, prompts that they'll have there that you ought to respond to. We always look toward the best or the target that they're asking for. So you look all the way to the right column. What are they asking for there? Try to hit all of those. Then we have task 2, which is your instructing and engaging the focused learners. Task 2 essentially is when you are putting things in action, putting things in motion. And this is where you will be recording yourself. Again, you can retrieve items from iMedia. Dr. Grassenbauer has put on reserve numerous resources for you all to be able to take your instruction for the purposes of submitting for grading. 5 rubrics for task 2 consists of the learning environment, engaging focused learners, deepening learning, supporting teaching and learning, analyzing teaching effectiveness. And finally, we have task 3, which is assessing learning. The 5 rubrics for task 3 are as follows: analyzing focused learners' performance, Using feedback to guide further learning. Learner use of feedback. Analyzing the focused learner's use of language and communication. Using assessment to inform instruction. You know, you've all heard this, numerous times in your courses here, that is the purpose of assessment. Assessment should be used to guide your instruction. Otherwise, what is it for? I mean, true, it's used, for record keeping, for school sakes, grading schools and whatnot. But for you as a teacher on that individual level, you really want to use those assessments to ask yourself, are my students getting it? Are there specific areas that they're not getting? And okay, now what do I need to do? I need to go back to the drawing board perhaps and kind of reconfigure some things, do some manipulations here to ensure that all of my students are understanding and achieving the objectives that I set forth. In terms of the rubrics, Dr. Krebsker will be going into more detail with those as we move along. But again, this is, again, just a refresher in terms of an overview of what your 3 tasks are and bare bones of, what are the rubrics associated with each task. So, getting started, tackling task 1. So as I touched on before, you want to be familiar with or know your learners. All right, this can't be a situation where you just kind of walk into a classroom and pick out 2 kids because they seem to be the quietest ones in the room and hey, you know what, they'll cooperate. Cooperation, yes, it should be factored in. However, that shouldn't be the sole determinant for choosing your actual target learners. Again, you are required to have 2 target learners unless you provide a rationale for why you would have 1. All right. So again, you can have 1, but you must provide a rationale for why you have 1 learner as opposed to 2. Again, going back up here to point number 1. Be familiar with and knowing your learners. The more varied his or her needs, the easier it will be for you to demonstrate and elaborate on your skills in planning, instruction, and assessment. So again, remember, there's a lot of writing that you will need to do for this. And if you have students with varied abilities, that allows you to be able to speak further on, what it is that you're doing to address their needs. It allows for you to, in many ways, demonstrate your ability to plan for X, Y, and Z, for your ability to mix things up so that you will engage those learners. Baseline data. We talk about baseline data, most definitely in your behavior class. And we know that baseline data is what? Exactly. It is the data that is collected prior to the intervention. All right, before anything is done, this is where our student is. All right, that is what baseline data gives you. Furthermore, for this project, your baseline data is extremely important because it allows for you to communicate to the grader, this is where the student is, this is where I was able to bring the student. Because you can't just speak on these things in an abstract sense. There has to be something concrete that you can point to demonstrate that there was growth. Knowing the student's prior learning, the new student's learning needs, the student's strengths. So, again, when we talk about this idea of engagement, this is your hook right here, is working on your students' strengths, understanding where they are, how is it that I can latch on to where they are and bring them to where I want them to be. All right, so that is where strengths come in. For example, I put in, cultural assets. So what are some things that you know about the student's culture, maybe even the student's community, that you can bring into your lessons for the purposes of engaging your students? As I said before, you need 2 learners unless there's a rationale for 1. When you choose these 2 learners, you want to choose 2 learners with an IEP. Different from, some of your courses perhaps, with some of your fieldwork assignments, sometimes you're given the option that, okay, if you don't have access to an IEP or a student who has an IEP, then you can choose a student who has some kind of academic deficiency or some kind of social behavior that needs correcting. But for this, you really do need that IEP in place. Again, falling back on this idea of making things easier for yourself, choose students who have, who are functioning on the same level. Again, there's always variance here and there, but for the most part, you want to choose 2 students who are functioning at the same level because it helps you in terms of your planning and in terms of your actual lesson plan development. It would also be beneficial if both have a similar IEP goal. Because again, with these lessons that you are presenting, with the target skills that you're focusing in on, there needs to be a connection to the IEP goal. And we're going to get a little more into that more specifically as we move along here. So, what are you to do? Sequencing isn't correct here. It's alright though. Alright, so again, tackling task 1. As I said, we're going to primarily focus on task 1 today. The learning targets. So there's 2 learning targets that need to be selected. You need a primary learning target, you need a supporting learning target. Your primary learning target, it could be academic or functional. If we work along the lines of keeping things easier for yourself, I feel like academic would probably be the easiest route to go. Especially if you have the option. Some of you all may be in positions where you don't have the option and that they only work with, functional skills and whatnot. But if you have the option, I would definitely choose academic targets or academic learning targets. Your supporting learning targets. So this is from a different curricular area than the primary, but it is related. At least one of these targets must be related to the IEP goal. So again, at least one must be related to an IEP goal. Meaning it doesn't matter if it's the primary learning target or the supporting learning target, one of them must be connected to the IEP goal. So we provide an example here for you all. So the primary target that we have, define word prefixes. As you can see, what do you notice about the target? It's somewhat broad, and that's fine because the specificity is in the objectives that you'll have, which we'll talk about later. So your primary target, define word prefixes. Obviously, standards are always there. We always have to have them on our lesson plans. So you need to identify the standard that is related to your target. So here we have our ELA standard. Determine the meaning of the new word form when a known prefix is added to a known word. Our supporting target that we're going to use is identify the onset and rhyme of monosyllabic words. Fancy way of saying one-syllable word. What's the relationship that you see between the primary and supporting target? Do you see a relationship there? Please share.
The rhyme, it's the prefix and the onset and the rhyme. The way how you teach the prefix, you have to teach the onset and the rhyme to teach the prefix.
Okay, okay. Anything else anyone sees? And, again, I throw this question out there because the relationship that you make with these 2 targets is written down. It's in your writing. It's in your explanation in your writing. That is why it's extremely important for your writing to be clear and coherent, so that you can establish that relationship for the grader. And they understand, okay, so these 2 targets, this supporting target is, in fact, something that supports our primary target. Um, the academic standard for our supporting target, no one is another ELA standard. No one applied grade level phonics and word analysis skills in decoding words. And if you look down here, you see that our IEP goal is related to our supporting target. That was purposely done just to demonstrate that, just because of the wording of primary and supporting, the IEP goal does not have to be related to your primary target. It can, in fact, still be related to the supporting target, which is the case in our example here. So our IEP goal, by May 2014, the student will read 50 sight words with 100% accuracy on 3 out of 4 1-minute timing trials. Onset and rhyme, again, kind of going back to you all's literacy, literacy 1, perhaps this was told to you all in. But, onset and rhyme is one of those things that strengthens phonological awareness. So with phonological awareness, obviously, that is the big umbrella that incorporates different activities such as, onset and rhyme, blending, segmenting, etc., etc., etc. So these are all key skills to have for learning words with automaticity. Remember that, automaticity, the theory of automaticity. Reason why I bring that up is because in your writing, and I'll again touch on this point later, but in your writing, you have to be able to refer to theory for why you did this. What is the theoretical foundation for your instructional strategies? So if I were, again, to be writing in my commentary, I would definitely refer to the theory of automaticity and the ability to automatically, see a word, know a word, say a word, so that I don't, use up too much of my mental capacity and have the inability to comprehend what it is I read. So again, that's a theory that I would bring into play because it's helping to guide what it is I'm doing. Now it's you all's turn. You all's turn to develop 5 sets of primary and supporting learning targets. Additionally, for each set, create IEP goals that is related to at least one learning target. Again, that it could be either your primary or your supporting. When time is up, be able to explain how the supporting target is needed to help the learner access instruction or demonstrate learning in relation to the primary learning target. So I'll just flip back to the previous slide for a moment, just so you can kind of see what it is that's being asked for. A primary target you need to create. You need to create a supporting target. Standards, don't worry about that. You don't necessarily have access to the specific standard that's addressing, so that's okay. Right now we just want to look and just have a little practice with this, developing that primary and supporting target. So we will give you all some time to actually work on that now. Have fun. Alright, so thank you all for completing that activity. Now we're going to talk about the objectives. Alright, so again, with each of your targets, the primary and the supporting, you're going to have objectives that are listed. Objectives, what are they? Again, just to kind of review this, or what should be reviewed for you all, is that your objectives are specific measurable steps that the learners will work on to achieve the learning targets. Your objectives describe what it is your learner will be able to do by the end of the lesson, and your objectives are directly related to your assessment. So again, you can't have an assessment at the end that is completely, out of nowhere when it comes to your objective. because then that's going to be a flag also for your grader to look at, because they always look for alignment. What is the alignment between the objective and the assessment? And you know, there should be a definite direct overlap there. So we go back to our example that we provided again with the primary target. And we're going to use that to demonstrate some of our lesson objectives. So again, the primary target was to define word prefixes. All right, we have our standard listed, and now we have our 3 objectives. Okay, you see that they are measurable. If you, refer back even to your behavior class. What was always pounded in? What is it? It's measurable and observable. Measurable and observable.
And operationally defined.
That's exact for your target behavior definition. All right, it has to be defined in terms that are measurable and observable. Your graders for this edTPA, they're looking for the same thing. All right, you can't just have something again that you can't operate in the abstract. All right, so with no more than 2 prompts, students will be able to identify all of the words beginning with a prefix on a scrambled word list. With no more than 2 prompts, students will be able to accurately define R-E, P-R-E, B-I-U-N, D-E-O-U-T. All right, so your prefixes of re, pre, by, un, the, out. All right, specific, you see the specificity. With no prompts, students will state the new meaning of 10 known words when a known prefix is added. So again, the specificity, you have a numeric value there that helps you understand and helps you be able to actually kind of measure this and to look to see, has this objective been met or not. Now, of course, we have an activity related to what you all just did. Using the 5 sets of primary and supporting learning targets that you and your partner created in the previous activity, create 3 to 5 objectives for each learning target. And before you begin, I'm going to, just have it be known to you all that these activities that you're doing, in some ways it is kind of overkill, but to kind of get you to overthink, because on the edTPA, you're only actually required to have 1 objective per target. So with your primary target, you're only required to have 1 objective. With your supporting target, you're only, learning target, you're only asked to provide 1 objective. So again, for our activity purposes, we're in some ways just kind of doing an overkill with it. But what you are submitting to edTPA will only consist of 1 objective per target. All right, so thank you for completing that activity. So we, gave you pretty much we gave you the meat, or the real focal point of what is going to be ultimately your lesson plan. All the other elements of your lesson plan revolve around those learning targets and your objectives. How you're going to go about doing your procedures. All right, so this is just a template of a lesson plan that we highly encourage for you all to use, because it has within it all of the elements, one, that edTPA is providing, and all the elements that you would find typically within a lesson plan. The edTPA asks that each lesson plan include 2 lesson objectives. So that will be 1 for each learning target. Again, your objectives, as we said before, are measurable. It asks for a list of assessment tools.
Okay.
So it asks for your list of assessment tools, and data collection procedures to monitor progress toward both lesson objectives. So if you look right here, you'll see your assessments. Up here you'll have your standards. And I mean, you can even write in, like if you have an IEP goal, you can write that here as well. That would be appropriate. Objectives, again, the materials, resource that you're using. What are you using as the motivation? What is your hook? How are you engaging your learners? So again, all of these elements are included in this lesson plan. You know, the procedures would go right here. Your mini lesson or direct instruction right here. So if you remember that sequence that we always talk about, the I do, we do, you do, this in many ways goes along with it. So your direct instruction here, guided practice here. Here this can be either independent or group practice. So hence, I do, we do, you do. And then right here, your reflection piece. So with any lesson, you always want to reflect. Who didn't get it? Who did get it? What could I as a teacher have done better or delivered better with more clarity? What went well? You know, how can I capitalize on what went well? So again, this is a template of the lesson plan. You fill in, obviously, the space in the boxes. Your lesson plans can be no longer than 4 pages each. So keep that in mind as you develop them. Additionally, commentary type information does not go on your lesson plan. Task 1, tackled. So what are you going to do? Write a rationale for your instructional choices. Again, we talked about it before. The theory, providing a theory. Instructional choices must be rooted in theory. You have to be able to thoroughly explain the theoretical concept. They don't necessarily ask for referencing in your commentary, but it doesn't say you can't do it. So, I mean, I think it would always be a good idea to provide references within. You can't just simply name drop, though. You can't just say, well, you know, Piaget said, and then just think that that's enough. That's not enough. You need to actually go into detail and thoroughly explain what the theory is, how it's connected to your instructional the instructional strategies that you're using. Informal and formal assessments must be utilized. What would an example of an informal assessment be?
Observation.
Exactly.
Teacher created the test.
Observation, questions that are asked, you know, during your instruction. Formal assessments, you know, sometimes, you know, I mean, of course, your standardized would fall under that criteria. Teacher created can actually fall in both categories in terms of informal and formal. And now just some reminders, as I said before, your lesson plans are no longer than 4 pages each, and your commentary is limited to 11 pages. With your commentary, you look at 11 pages and you might think with that number, wow, that's a lot, when in fact it is not. You are provided with prompts that you need to respond to. So again, the challenge will actually be keeping that commentary below the 11 pages. Questions? Great. Well, Dr. C and the entire SPED faculty are confident that you'll do just fine. And with this picture of this glorious man right here, he will now be the next one in line to go into further details about your rubrics and you know, other information that he's going to provide for you.
Thank you, Dr. Yan.